Real people, real opinions.
Real Talk Radio. The multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.
The big story of the day is Ryan Tubridy. And of course, many of you would have watched what was a televisual feast today. Or if you watched the whole lot of it, by the way, from 10 o'clock this morning, right up to after 6 o'clock today. It was quite astonishing, of course, to listen to Noel tell us how much he loved Ryan.
We weren't invited, we asked, and we saw, over the last 3 weeks, I've never seen such horrendous reporting. And why suddenly the most trusted man in Ireland, Ryan Tubridy, it was like throw him under a bus. What? Why?
He loves Ryan, he really does. And then, of course, Ryan was trapped in his house.
It's hard to leave the house if you really want me to be honest about it. So
Big house.
For what?
Fairness to be trapped in.
I spent 3 weeks watching people telling stories. And I'm sorry, I'm leaving a gap. Forgive me, it's a comma, not a full stop. But I know, like, I'm not looking for sympathy now or violin. I'm simply saying to you, you asked me the question, and you bring up, like, the kids. My relationship with the children of Ireland is so important to me. I know that sounds grandiose, but actually it is. I want them to be happy and hopeful and proud to be Irish and read lots of books and just be wonderful young people. You know, that doesn't change, you know. But what's happened in the last 3 weeks, it's like frenzy.
Well, he did go through a lot in the last 3 weeks, in fairness. Niall Donald is investigations editor with the Sunday World. Good evening to you, Niall. How are you?
Hiya, Niall. How's things?
Good. I mean, what was it trending? Hashtag Tubs in the pubs, because of course all the pubs were showing it on the big screen. Purely by accident, RTE had a ratings topper today. But how do you think Ryan handled it?
I think he probably came out slightly stronger than he went in. I think there probably will be a future for Ryan Tubridy in radio or in RTE. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was an absolute... I suppose him and Noel Kelly went in to say they did absolutely nothing wrong and that they were victims of this kind of media campaign, I suppose. Yeah. I don't know if that'll come out, that'll be the final judgment on what they said, but I think he probably comes out a bit stronger. He probably has assured himself a future in broadcasting, I would think.
I'm not too sure which politician said it. It could have been John Brady from Sinn Féin, but I'm not too sure. One of them said they'd gone through the whole day and they were none the wiser. In other words, nothing was really answered. They said a lot but didn't really say anything at all, if you understand what I'm saying. I mean, of course, Noel Kelly denied, that this kind of this invoice, which, by the way, some people have suggested is almost a fraudulent invoice, was passed on, or that he had any knowledge of it. And then he was asked numerous times, had he seen the invoice? And he kind of didn't know whether to answer that or how to answer that. He even looked back at his lawyer at one stage in relation to it. Ryan Tubridy's still insistent that he took a pay cut and doesn't accept that the 75 grand deal that he got, even though RTE would end up having to pay it, was a compromise or basically compensated him for him. He doesn't seem to want to ever admit that.
No, I don't think they wanted to admit anything wrong. I mean, the Noel Kelly invoice, which basically he invoiced for consultancy. So
COVID consultancy, I think, wasn't it? Yes. Yeah.
Well, so we went around and around and came back again and again to this invoice. And I think all parties accept that neither Noel Kelly or Ryan Tubridy offered any consultancy to RTE or to Renault. So that what's written on that invoice is incorrect. Everybody accepts that. Noel Kelly, when pushed on this, and he was pushed by almost every single politician who asked him questions, he just repeated the same line again and again, that he did what he did as instructed by RTE in terms of writing, in terms of writing the invoice. Now, whether that, if you do make an invoice, if you or I made an invoice, we're responsible for what's in that invoice.
But didn't one politician... Didn't one politician suggest that his father had said to him, if I asked you to put your hand in the fire, would you put your hand in the fire? And in other words, you don't just do it because RTE says it to you. You do it because it's the right or the wrong thing to do.
Exactly. And you, as a company boss, he's responsible for what's written. And so, but we never really got to the bottom of that because, of course, there is no good answer for that.
No,
from
there is no
Noel
bottom.
Kelly's point of view.
The other thing,
exactly.
the other thing that was interesting as well, Noel Kelly constantly denying he had any relationship whatsoever or a good relationship with Dee Forbes. He said he had met her on a couple of occasions in negotiations, but never so much as had coffee or tea with her or anything like that, which strikes me as hard to believe because from some people or witness accounts, he was never out of the building. So it strikes me as hard to believe.
Well, I mean, look, you have to take people at their word, and he stood up in the Dáil or in that committee, in fairness, with just an easy and said what he said. So, but I suppose it does. If he didn't have a good relationship, friendship with Dee Forbes, how was he convincing? And which, I accept him at his word. But it's amazing that RTE were being convinced to hand over these incredible sums
of money
to his talent. I mean, you work in the media industry as I do. Those sums aren't available in any other commercial broadcaster. But he was able to go in again and again and get these sums for a range of clients, and it is bewildering. I think at one point last week, one of the politicians said RTE were competing against themselves for these people. But I think it probably, even more than the individual contracts he got, I think it shows the sign of a culture within RTE where public money ultimately was not being, was being spent in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense, I think, objectively.
No, I think Backhurst's first job is going to have to be to put somebody in there who monitors spending, because the idea of I know this certainly isn't Ryan Tubridy's fault that they spent $5,000 on flip-flops, was bonkers. I mean, it's all right. I heard people comparing RTE to the BBC and saying, well, the BBC pay big money for talent. And I said, yeah, but that's because they're competing with ITV, who also have deep pockets, who are an independent broadcaster, and they compete against them. But there's nobody in this country is going to pay a DJ essentially for 1 hour a day, which is what Ryan is on. Forget about the Late Late Show for the moment, but a DJ for 1 hour a day, the amount of money that RTE were paying Ryan Tubridy, no matter how good he happens to be. And by the way, can I just point out, because I've said this on numerous occasions on the show, I like Ryan. I've met Ryan on numerous occasions, and he's a really nice guy. Now, I do think there was an oversight on his behalf not to draw attention to this before now, and I think he's made a big mistake that he's going to have to do a lot of mea culpa. But in saying that, nobody's going to hand him the money he's getting in RTE, so RTE's pockets were just too deep.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you're speaking about RTE relative to the BBC, I mean, the BBC is a worldwide organisation that services a country of whatever 60 million in the UK. I'm not sure the exact number. I mean, the scale of it is just not comparable to RTE yet. People in RTE are getting paid as much as the BBC. It's like, comparing Manchester United to Bowes or something. They're just in a totally different league.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Ryan Tubridy, he and it might well be the case that he's not. He a number of times he sort of basically said he's not all over the details of contracts and money, and that may well be the case. And I know some people, if you I was looking at the comments on some of the stories, and it's very divided that he's a disgrace. Or,
well, there's a perception. There's a perception of greed, isn't there? I mean, he did say, look, he didn't apologise for being well paid, and I suppose why should he? Because like I say, now if my boss turned around to me tomorrow and says I'm going to pay you 350 grand, I'll gladly take it and his arm off with it. Okay, so realistically, nobody can be blamed for taking money when it's being offered to you, as long as you don't believe there's anything underhand going on. But in saying that, I don't know whether he ridded himself of that perception, which is the perception at the moment. I mean, there's no perception out there that he's done anything illegal or anything wrong, but immoral or greedy. That was the general perception by the general public over the last 3 weeks from the evidence we've heard so far, and I don't think he shook that off today.
Not fully, I think, but I think he shook it off to a degree, and I think in the fullness of time, I think he will get a second go in with the public. I think that's my perception of it. Like the details of it, we've watched it today, and you've probably paid a good lot of attention to it as I have, but in a number of months the details kind of got forgotten, and he hasn't covered himself in glory. He's been somebody in the public eye for I think it's 30 years or whatever, and maybe without a single sort of blot on his copy, and this will be something that'll hang over him, I think. But I think a lot of people will be a bit forgiving. I mean, I think it would have been, personally, if I was Ryan Tubridy, I would have come out straight away and said, look, I was just a bit embarrassed. I don't like talking about my money, and maybe I should have said something earlier. I think people would have been much more tolerant of that. But I don't think it was a masterclass performance from him, and it certainly wasn't a masterclass performance from Noel Kelly, who looked flustered, and I don't think he.
I think Ryan relied on him a lot today when it came to the figures, because by his own admittance, he's fairly incompetent when it comes to looking after his own finances. So that's why he said he uses an agent. But there was a stage where I'm not too sure again who asked Ryan in relation to the charities he's worked for, and during COVID-19 when he said we're all in this together, and he talked about people's economy or people's wages being reduced and everything else. She was kind of suggesting to him, well, did you not feel guilty taking that amount of money, knowing that your wages were being subsidised by this side deal or tripartite deal? And he again kind of went into denial mode. I did take a pay cut. And she said, well, no, you didn't really, because you got this extra 75,000 that was guaranteed to be paid to you by RTE. And that was an opportunity I thought he missed, where he could have said, in hindsight, yes, it probably wasn't the best thing in the world. And I think people would have appreciated that more.
Possibly so. I wouldn't disagree with you on that. I think, look, I think he said at one point, just because you're well paid doesn't mean you have a conscience. And I think that's, that's fair enough. People can have there's many people that get well paid that do a lot of good or whatever. I think it wasn't a masterclass, but I think a lot of people will look at it and feel a twinge of sympathy for him. I think it's, you have to say, 7 hours or whatever it was, 8 hours of questioning like that.
Yeah, okay.
It's tough on anybody, whether they've done wrong or not.
Yeah, of course.
So you do feel a bit of sympathy for him, but it's not like exactly as you said. Somebody, I can't remember which politician it was. I think it was Kieran Cannon, who said, we've been through all of this and we're not really any clearer. Now RTE are going to be brought back again, and I bet you we won't be any clearer at the end of all. Well,
RTE have already suggested, they put out a statement this morning contesting some of the stuff that Noel Kelly has put in his statement already as being untrue or not being a representation of the truth. So they're obviously going to clarify that tomorrow. So that's going to cause even more complication. I don't think they'll ever really get to the bottom of it,
No, I don't think we will. But I think you can say in an overall sense, like RTE is going to have to change. It's a mess.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a mess, and it's going to have to change. And whatever about 20 years ago, when back in the early 2000s, they were probably making huge amounts of money, and there was a justification. They basically had a monopoly on all sorts of media in Ireland, and they just haven't changed quickly enough, and they're just not spending the public money in a clever and careful manner. And the ins and outs of who said what to invoice. Maybe we'll never fully get an answer that satisfies. I suspect we won't.
Do you think Kevin Backhurst is the man for the job, or is he taking on a poison chalice there?
Well, he's taken on a poison chalice for sure. There's no doubt about it that there's going to have to be huge structural change in RTE, and it's going to be resisted from within. It's just not an easy job. It's like being a Premier League manager. You might have a little bit of success, but it's going to be tough going. And I don't know if he's the right man for the job. I never met him or know much about him, but he's an insider again within RTE. I know he's not been there all his career or anything like it, but he has been there for a period of time.
Well, at least he spent some time with the BBC as well, so he would have a good idea of big organisations and how they should and shouldn't work.
He would.
He talks the talk. Anyway, that seems to be the case. Let's see, does he walk the walk, as they say?
Yeah, but look, he's in his favour. He's coming in at a real low point for the organisation, and I think everybody is going to accept that the things are going to have to change, and just merely continuing on as they have been doing, which a lot of it has been, saving costs by cutting programming and but just keeping the bureaucracy or the middle management untouched within the organisation. So
I think you're right. I think they probably needed somebody who wasn't an insider, because as you said already, he was head of news going back many years ago, and he missed out on the opportunity to be the DG, and that's why he left, I think, at the time. But I suppose the morale in RTE is something he's going to have to deal with, because for the low-paying staff, many of them on half the amount that Ryan Tubridy was getting per year, topped up on his salary. It doesn't leave a good taste in their mouth, does it?
No, and they'll have to innovate as well, like everybody in the media, which as the digital revolution continues, and they're going to have to So a lot of that is going to have to come from younger people. They're going to have to be empowered and paid well and get the best talent. And I don't think they've been doing that. I think they've been getting a lot of young people in on very low wages, and it's the people at the older people have been untouched. So it's a tough job.
Well, I mean, I know from being in the industry, from independent radio, RTE is always seen as the kind of the boys' club, and they always hire within. There's a lot of, I suppose, my father worked there, my brother worked there, so I'm getting a job there. Yeah. There's a lot of nepotism going on. And it does seem like a boys' club, or certainly did for a long, long time. And that doesn't seem to have changed when it comes to, I suppose, the on-air employees.
No. And look, I mean, it's like they've been brought in there, and really what's been exposed has been an absolute shambles, really, where these deals are being done at the sort of top level of RTE, and they're not serving the purpose of the organisation at all. It's like it has been shocking. I mean, like you're talking about as an institution of the state, a huge company, and for them to be sending around dodgy invoices disguising who money is going to, like, it's just not really on. I mean, it wouldn't be on in a small local radio station, but to see it in a national commercial semi-state is quite shocking, really. The explanation.
But this wastage of money, sorry for interrupting, but the wastage of money, Niall, that we're seeing within RTE, and I'm just using the flip-flops for examples, or tickets for gigs, or whatever it was they were blowing money on. That, and I remember years ago, a mate of mine who worked there told me about the taxi bill. This idea that staff, would be out on the night on a Saturday night and they'd walk back to RTE and get a taxi on account. I mean, that was well known in those days. I don't know if that still goes on. But all of that wastage of money, there's nothing new in that in the public sector. I mean, RTE is public sector. I wonder, if we had the same drill down, because of the Ryan Tubridy situation, we've gone into a massive drill down and audit into how RTE are spending money and wasting money. If you did the same drill down in the HSE or the Department of Social Protection or whatever it happened to be, I think you would find, or many of the NGOs in Ireland, I think you would find a massive waste of money.
You might well do. I mean, you may well do. I mean, I think
that might be the next investigation, by the way, the HSE.
Maybe. Well, I mean, I think the problem with RTE is equivalent to the HSE in that, like, they seem to spend a lot of money in the bureaucracy of continuing to run the organisation, and not enough on the frontline services, if you wanted, the HSE. And the equivalent of the frontline services in RTE is programme making and all of that sort of stuff, which is fallen by the wayside. It's easy to bash RTE. I mean, they do great work as well every day of the week, and some of the reporters are excellent. They had a really impressive Primetime Investigates last night. Yeah. Whatever your take on it is. So it's not to knock the organisation. I mean, it's easy you don't want to be on a pylon on Ryan Tubridy or anybody else, but they will have to change.
But how are they going to manage this going forward? Firstly, we're seeing now resistance to paying the licence fee as a form of protest, and I'm seeing that quite a lot trending on Twitter as well. And you're seeing judges now giving people the minimum fine. You heard a judge in Carlow over the weekend gave people the minimum fine for not having a television licence, only because he had to fine people because he had a rant about RTE as well. In the same day, Leo Varadkar yesterday turns around, which I thought was bad timing, by the way, talking about a broadcasting charge rather than a television licence, which they were meant to do years ago. But do you think there's going to be more resistance paying a television licence? And realistically, can RTE now go to government and with their hand out, as they do every single year, and say, we need a few quid? That's going to look bad, isn't it?
Well, it's going to look bad, but they're going to do it anyway. That's the reality, because they're in a spiral of debt. I just think that they're going to have to, they're still going to have to look for money. I think the public it's going to leave a long-term bad taste in the mouths of the public. I think one of the problems for RTE is, like, this has been dragged out 3 weeks. I mean, the Ukraine war got about a week of coverage, and we're in the third week of constant coverage of this, and a lot of that is...
Oh, no, it's completely over the top. It's completely... Yeah. I mean, And the sad part about it is, and you know, of course, as well, because you're involved in crime, you're a crime specialist yourself. I mean, the amount of other stories that are happening over the last 3 weeks that are ending up on page 10, so to speak, you know, and really big stories. I mean, we talked last week in relation to, for example, children who had gone missing within under the care of Tusla. And that's which is a big story at the moment. Now, I know Leo Varadkar said that is being investigated, but we're not talking about it enough. There are other stories out there, you know, that we should all be talking about. But unfortunately, nobody wants to talk about anything except RTE. This is kind of social contagion with scandal in Ireland.
Yeah, but I think RTE, by dragging out every little bit of information over weeks rather than getting it all out there, they've managed to turn what could have been a week-long crisis into a month-long one. I mean, they just haven't seemed to have got it into their heads that they need to be more honest and direct with the public. Where they could have got all of this information out really, really quickly. And that's what they should have done. And I think that's the first thing RTE are going to have to do. They're going to have to change their attitude to, you know, to being held accountable, because they're in a unique position in that they're getting public money. They're a broadcasting company that are getting public money. It's a really privileged position to be in, considering money is seeping out of broadcasting. And they're going to have to be held accountable in a different way if they're going to regain the trust of the public. They're going to have to be more open and direct, and they're going to have to be showing that they're changing. Whether that can all happen, I don't know. There's certainly, you know, the people are not going to be happy to pay their license in the next 12 months.
Well, I suppose they are going to be competing, of course, against podcasts, one of which I do myself, and I know you do as well with Nicola Talent. What was the big story this week for the podcast, by the way?
Well, we actually did a bit on RTE.
Did you? Why not?
And it does, because I think...
So did I.
You know, So, I mean, I think it does touch on you know, what is criminal behaviour. We heard, of course, in the Dáil committees, one of RTE's own financial people describe it as potentially defrauding the public.
Yeah.
So look, I mean, it is. It
has all the elements of it, hasn't it? Concealment, and it has all the elements of it as well.
Look, I mean, exactly. You know, it's up to the guards to investigate that. But you know,
Matty McGrath is calling. Matty McGrath is insisting they do. God love him. By the way, the funniest moment of the whole thing, and I know I shouldn't say funniest because there's nothing funny about what's going on, but when Matty McGrath said last week, "Are you loyal? Are you loyal?" And the face. He was saying, "Are you loyal?" But it did sound like, "Are you lying?" And they all looked at each other, and you could see their faces going white.
Look. I mean, rather than getting into the names, some of the politicians are really good, but there was a fair old bit of grandstanding going on as well.
There was.
It has to be said, wasn't it?
There absolutely was. But I have to say, it was the worst television ever, but it was addictive, completely addictive.
It was. And look, it's, you know, and some of that is, you look at it and you think, it's a bit of a you know, gladiators in the Colosseum. Like, it is, you know, you see people under that type of pressure, and it's compelling to watch. And
the last time I got that much excitement out of an investigation was the O.J. Simpson case. That was the last time I watched the television, you know, for so long.
It is. It's pure human drama. But, you know, look, there is an effect on everybody who's been up there, from RTE and from Ryan Tubridy and all. It's tough on them. And, like, that's on a human level. I never discount that or say that, you know, people, but, you know, you have to, that if you work for the public service and you get hugely paid, as nearly all the people who appeared there, whether from the RTE management or broadcasters, you know you're going to be accountable, or you could be accountable someday, and they're held accountable, and it's tough. You know, you can see people sitting there. It's not.
Well, by the way, finally, Niall, sorry, I mean, Dee Forbes, I mean, it's a name that'll go down in history, because there's been no sign of her. Now, I know she said she's unwell, and from what I believe, she may not even be in the country at the moment. But what do you think is going to happen there? Do you think she will ever appear before the Oireachtas, ever answer any questions? Now, I'm not suggesting the whole thing is her fault or anything like that, but I'm just saying, you know, she does hold the key to a lot of this stuff.
Well, I mean, I don't think she'll ever appear. I mean, I think the other question to ask is, should you appear? I mean, she would have had a hard time of it, but maybe she would have been better off getting out there, however tough it is, and putting her perspective out there. I think you saw that with Ryan Tubridy today. He was absolutely silent for 3 weeks. And I think, you know, he comes out of that today. He may not have answered all the questions. He certainly won't have answered them satisfactorily.
He didn't come out any worse than he went into it, that's for sure.
I think he came out a bit better, and I think Dee Forbes should have gone on. She did what she did as part of an organisation, and she would have been better off, I think, going out and facing the public now. She said she's sick, and we have to, again, take that. That's what somebody says, and that may well be true. And absolutely, take it as true. But, you have to wonder sometimes. It is people a natural human tendency to hide away under pressure. But I think Ryan Tubridy and Noel Kelly, they may not have covered themselves in glory. I personally don't think they particularly did, but I still think they did the right thing by going out there and putting their side across. Because for sure, nobody's putting Dee Forbes' side across at the moment.
No, absolutely not. Well, listen, it's been wonderful talking to you. By the way, if people want to catch up, yourself and Nicola Tallant do a great podcast called Crime World. If you want to catch up, I've listened to many of them, by the way, and I found them hugely, not, I was going to say entertaining, but intriguing is probably the better word for them.
Well, thank you very much, Niall.
Thank you very much, Niall, and I appreciate you coming on the air. It's good to have a name like Niall, isn't it? It means, the word Niall stands for intelligence, don't you? I'm joking.
Well, I didn't know that, but I'll tell that to everybody now.
Listen, Niall Donald, thank you very much indeed, and I appreciate you coming on the air to talk to me.
Thanks very much.
Real people, real opinions.
Real Talk Radio, the multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.